The Western is a famous genre that still holds up to this day. It earned its reputation through the public and critics with various films over the years, from classics like Stagecoach to dubious but somewhat true interpretations of films such as Star Wars, as some like to call it a space western. The Western genre depicts the wild western territory of America, usually at around the time of the Civil War. This is a time where legislation was unsettling and inconsistent across states and areas, and these films are usually set in regions with a lack of legislation and law enforcement, such as vast deserts where consequences are unexistent. Monument Valley is a common place across titles that have been released over the years, and it is a common shooting place for all these films. Many iconic westerns have been released over the years, and this is such a flexible genre that it can be easily integrated into other genres and themes, like sci-fi through Back to the Future 3, comedy through various Tarantino films, namely Django Unchained, superhero films like Logan, and thrillers like No Country for Old Men. Perhaps more importantly though, this genre is used as a reflection of the current time, where real-life conflicts and issues are criticized through it, like racism, the division of people, greedy use of law and order, among many others, making these films timeless, as these issues are as prevalent today as they were during the production and writing of each one of these films. Because of the nature of these issues, the portrayal of violence across different themes and historical periods in the creation of these films is used as a tool to evoke feelings of empathy and sympathy with the viewer. It essentially uses pathos to sell or communicate that idea to viewers. This holds true to the reality faced in the American Wild West, where violence and murder would be used for profit, often seen in films through Western tropes such as bounty hunters, corrupt law enforcement, and escaped prisoners. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, directed by Sergio Leone in 1966, is a classic Western, with themes of revenge and friendship combined, where violence is presented as a tool for survival in business. The film introduces the concept of an anti-villain, allowing for violence to be used on all sides of the conflict throughout the story. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a spaghetti western. This term means that the film was produced by an American company and directed by an Italian director. This essentially allows for the film to have an outside view of American issues. The film was set during the Civil War in the mid to late 1800s, creating a distinct view of American history based on the time's conception of this period, and the film's release in 1966 places it during a time in history where the Cold War and the Vietnam War were political topics commonly debated, and the characters' greed and self-interest without care for anything in the way of their objectives is a powerful commentary on the American values at the time, such as the American dream. It can be speculated that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was a key driver to the revision of American history that was to come in the following decades. On the other hand, there is Django Unchained, directed by Quentin Tarantino in 2012. The film is a postmodernist western with revisionist themes and concepts. It introduces comedic violence to the genre, with purposes of business mostly, survival sometimes, and this is presented in Tarantino's classic gore-heavy style of violence. Django Unchained is set in Texas in 1858, and it touches on themes of race, slavery, revenge, and violence. The setting is just 3 years before the American Civil War, and it is in a southern state of the US that pushed against civil rights for black people and fought for a separatist movement. Slavery is a prevalent subject in the film, and it chooses to touch on that subject, demonstrating violence in Tarantino's classic, satisfying yet controversial style. The film's release in 2012 also coincides with many civil rights movements that occurred at the time, which all eventually led to the Black Lives Matter movement that resurged in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. At this time, the then President Barack Obama was running for re-election with a heavy focus on reducing racial discrimination, similar to John F. Kennedy in the 1960s, close to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly's release date. Similarly to the issues prevalent in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly's release date, the Iraq War and wars in the Middle East in general were also prevalent during Barack Obama's presidency, which shows the similarity in issues presented at the time of both of these films' release dates. Both films aim to demonstrate the experience of the Wild West during a similar period in its history. Django Unchained is a depiction of the brutality of slavery, where it's intentionally graphic but still sugar-coated compared to historical reality, using comedic writing, quips, and comic tropes, seen commonly with Leonardo DiCaprio's character Calvin Candy, among other examples. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, on the other hand, has Leone's intention being to show the raw truth of the Old West, with violence as a tool for personal gain. It includes the arc with A Man with No Name and Tuco, where they partner up to take advantage of the legal system, create chaos, and commit crimes just to make money. In fact, the whole Dollars trilogy has this theme, and it all ends with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly's final shootout to see who gets the gold inside the grave. For films to have conflict, they must introduce a problem, And in westerns, there is the presence of a clear antagonist that poses a threat to the main characters, and to successfully communicate the danger brought by such antagonists, films will often employ violence. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Leone introduces the antagonist Angel Eyes, played by Lee Van Cleef, through an iconic scene. Angel Eyes is a bounty hunter and is presented completing a bounty at a family residence. The scene is very quiet, and the lack of sound enhances the viewer experience, who sits at the edge of their chair looking to see what happens next. Leone makes his tension evident, using thoughtful composition to isolate Angel Eyes and his target. As first impressions are easily the most important, Leone introduces Angel Eyes as a cold and analytic character who always plans his next move, with no room for unpredictability on his side, leaving it all to his victim and us, the viewers. Beyond the visual violence of the shooting and death, Leone also has developed a clear, high ground for Angel Eyes to stand on. The character demonstrates control of the situation, smirking after certain remarks, eating calmly, and silently waiting for Stevens to spill any information. The intelligent use of close-ups in the scene also tells us what the characters feel and how focused they are on each other, enclosing them and creating a claustrophobic atmosphere. The scene takes violence to another level, beyond murder and gore. It is a scene filled with suspense and tension, which combined create a psychologically thrilling and violent atmosphere, as if it were invading the viewer's own private space. In Django Unchained, Tarantino's introduction is more characteristic of him as an auteur. The violence is more explicit, very visual, and acts as a significant feature of this scene, just as in any other Tarantino film. Dr. Schultz and Django walk into Candy's room.
There you go. Why do you want to get in the Mandingo business?
Two slaves of his are fighting, and he has a few other men that are watching the fight with him, some from the bar and some from the pool table. This instantly provides the viewer with some context that this fight is used for entertainment and is a common occurrence. Candy refers to the fighters as mandingos, and while this wasn't really a common practice in the late 19th century in America, it does resemble something like human cockfighting, which is tremendously dehumanizing, and it is clear that Tarantino used his creative freedom to comment on racism and slavery here. When Schultz and Django walk into the room, Candy refuses to turn his head to them and remains focused on the fight without even an introduction, which throws off Dr. Schultz of all people, instantly setting him apart from other characters.
There you go. Why do you want to get in the Mandingo business?
You don't intend to allow your second to make the proper introductions?
Quit stalling now.
Candy goes straight into talking business, demonstrating his greed and eagerness for the doctor's money. While this happens, Django is escorted to the bar, which confuses other men in the room, as Django is a free black man in Southern America. The way Candy cheers and incentivizes this literal fight to the death shows his lack of humanity, and the violent spirit living in his art is made clear to the viewer. Both films are interlinked through time, with Tarantino even admitting that his favorite spaghetti western of all time is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Many say that without Sergio Leone, there would be no Tarantino, and that statement certainly holds its value, considering other films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Hateful Eight. Both directors have the reasons for presenting violence in the way they do.
It's out the way you want it.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because
a little
it's so
of it?
much fun, Jan. Get it?
In all seriousness, though, both directors aim to comment on the social challenges that America faces at the time of production, namely civil rights. Leone, when asked by a Time critic why his films were so violent, pointed to a page on their magazine depicting a young black man being shot by the police for being a civil rights activist. Violence in real life is much worse than what is depicted in these films, but unfortunately, the public lacks awareness of the issue, and so Leone and Tarantino choose to use their influence and art to comment and bring attention to the real world. And the only way they found viable to do so was by pushing the limits of violence in their own works.
Just a day!